Good morning, church. My name is Effie Moini, and today's reading will come from the book of Genesis, chapter 13, verses 1 to 11. Genesis 13, 1 to 11. Abram and Lot separate. So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev with his wife and everything he had, and Lot went with him. Abram had become very wealthy in livestock, in silver and gold. From the Negev, he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had earlier been, and where he had first built an altar. There Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now Lot, who was moving about with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, but the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And quarreling arose between Abram's headsman and the headsman of Lot. The Canaanites and the Perizzites were also living in the land at that time. So Abram said to Lot, "Let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and mine, for we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left." Lot looked and saw that the whole plain of Jordan was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt towards Zoar. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of Jordan and set out towards the east. The two men parted company. May the Lord bless his word.
I am quite pleased to see that our theme is now displayed. I do not necessarily have to remind you choices. And as we look at this topic today, by way of introduction, let me first of all take us to chapter 19 of the book of Genesis. I will not read the chapter. I just want to refer us to what happened in that chapter. It is the unfortunate, embarrassing story of Lot and his two daughters. It is the kind of story that you and I don't want to discuss in church or anywhere. And one of the questions we would ask ourselves is, how did that happen? How did Lot, whom the Bible identifies as a righteous man, end up in such a mess? I don't know about you, but in my thinking and my understanding of the story of Lot from the Bible, the answer to that question is in chapter 13. Lot had a choice to make. And as he approached that choice, he made a mistake. His mistake was driven by three factors. The first of these factors is that Lot was short-sighted. The second is that he was selfish. And the third is that he was superficial. In a minute, you will begin to see where I'm coming from. First of all, that Lot was short-sighted. when we read in verse 10, Lot looked and saw the valley of the Jordan, how it was well watered. Sometimes I joke and say, when Lot looked at the valley of the Jordan, and it was green, lush green, he probably could see where he would place the tee as he played golf with his friends. He looked on the outside and saw the beauty of it, but then in verse 11 it says, this was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. There was a beauty to the valley, but the end of that verse 10 says this was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, why do I say Lot was short-sighted? When you see certain things happening, you ought to be able to predict their outcomes. When you see a young child riding a bicycle that has no brakes down a very steep hill, you know that at the end of the story, at the bottom of that hill, there will be a crying child who needs comfort. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to prepare yourself for that. Lot was short-sighted because he could not see the sinfulness of the people of the valley, and that God would not just sit there and do nothing about that sinful behavior. And often we live our lives as if God is an observer in what happens. God will act on sin. A far-sighted Lot should have been able to look and say, things cannot go on like this. God is going to come down hard on the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. But in his short-sightedness, he could not see the future consequences of present actions. That is only part of his short-sightedness. Because when he went to the valley, we are told that Lot pitched his tent near Sodom. He went and pitched his tents near Sodom. He wasn't in the city. He was near the city. And somehow, Lot thinks he is safe as long as he is not inside the city. But in chapter 19, God sends the angels to destroy Sodom, and they come to Sodom. Where do they find Lot? Not near Sodom. They find Lot at the gate. Now, I've mentioned this to you before, that in ancient times, a gate wasn't just a place where they let you through into the city. Now, that's what our gate is for. We decide whether to close it when you come or open it. But in ancient times, and especially in the ancient Near East, a gate was a place where the elders of the community gathered to judge the people. So if these were those days, and you wanted to present your agenda to the local church council, the elders would be meeting at the gate. Now, Lot is at the gate. I can only guess that he's probably one of the elders of Sodom already. How did it happen? You see, the other thing about short-sightedness is that we assume that we are the only players in the game. Lot forgot that there were other players. On the one side, there is God who desires good for us and has instructed us how to live. But on the other side is the enemy, and he has his own designs. And often when we make the wrong decisions, we open the door for him, and he very gladly assists. If you read chapter 14, you will see how the devil assisted in Lot's mistake. Often we don't see it because we just see a story about Abraham beating up the armies of 4 kings. But the thing is, when the kings of the north attacked the kings of the valley, it says that they also captured Lot and took him with them. And then it was informed Abraham, your nephew, your kinsman, has been captured by some raiding armies, and they're on the way back to Mesopotamia with him. Abraham called 2 of his friends, gathered 320 men born in his house. Now, some years back, some people will remember there was this story of Jeshi Lamzeh, the old man's army. He had his own homegrown army of more than 300 men. He chased the captors of Lot, overtook them, beat them up, and rescued Lot. Now, you say, oh, wonderful, that's the end of the story. No. Lot comes back, sits in that valley, in his tent near Sodom. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that his mind is now working in overdrive. He sits there and thinks, I'm not safe here. Just my wife and 2 little kids. If the raids happen again, I will be a sitting duck. Now, Lot is not the only one whose mind is on overdrive. The king of Sodom is also thinking. His mind is in overdrive. He's thinking, that guy Lot, he's not bad to have as an ally. His uncle has a private army that can rescue us if there's trouble. So before long, you can imagine that the king of Sodom comes, or maybe sends a delegation. I suspect he comes himself to show just how serious it is. And he says to Lot, it's not safe here. You saw what happened. Now, of course, it happened to Sodom too, but we don't think straight when the devil is at work in us. So the king is saying, it's not safe for you. Look at what you were captured. Now, there's a wall in Sodom. We have a gate. People who come have to get through the gate. And I have good news for you, Lot. We have a free lot where you can put up your house. You don't even have to live in a tent anymore. Just come into Sodom. We will give you a plot on which you can build a house. How is that? We're not going to charge you anything. Just come. You're a good man. So Lot looks at it and he thinks, I can kill two birds with one stone. My family can be secure. I don't have to worry about them anymore. And I don't even have to pay for a plot to build a house. So we should not be surprised that when the angels came, they found Lot in Sodom. In his short-sightedness, he could not see those possibilities. And often, when we make foolish decisions, we don't look far enough to see the ramifications of that foolishness. He was short-sighted. But Lot was also selfish. In verse 11, it says, Lot chose for himself. Now, the nature of selfishness is also that it tends to be hurried, hasty. Lot chooses quickly. Now, part of the reason we make our choices quickly is so that someone else does not overtake us and get what we wanted. When he saw the beauty of the valley of the Jordan, he thought, let me get that before Abraham changes his mind and decides to make the first choice. I have first pickings, I'm going to choose the best. In that hastiness, he even ignored the culture of that time. In the culture of the time, Lot and Abraham were not equals. You may not remember the story. Let me refresh your memory. Abraham had two brothers. One of the brothers was the father of Lot, and this brother died young. So Abraham took Lot, his nephew, and made him part of his family. In other words, he adopted him. When Abraham talks to Lot, he's very generous in his language. He says, our workers, when they fight, you and I are fighting, and we should not fight because we are brothers. That's very generous, because Lot is nowhere near a brother. As a nephew, he is a son. The culture of the time was very African. You do not presume to make decisions that your father can make. You do not make choices for yourself that your father can make for you. The wisdom of culture said Lot should have turned back to Abraham and said, no, Father Abraham, do not allow me to make mistakes. You are my father. When my own father died, you took me under your wing. When we went to Egypt, you took me with you. When we came back, you came back with wealth, but so did I. Look at everything I have. If not for you, I would be some poor orphan back in Haran. Please, choose for me because you know what is good for me. If you tell me to go into that Judean desert, I will go because I know that you have my welfare at heart. But no, Lot did not do that because he did not want to miss the opportunity to put his tea where he wanted when he swung his golf club. Okay, just joking. Now, selfishness blinds us to obvious realities as it did Lot. And sometimes it's all for nothing. You make every effort, you make all the mistakes, and you get nothing out of it. Verse 15 was not read to us. But the men parted. And in verses 14, 15 onward, God comes to Abraham after Lot has departed from him. He says, Abraham, look north. He looks north. Now, look south. He looks south. Now, look east. He looks east. Now, look west. He looks west. And God says, Abraham, what do you see? And Abraham looks and he says, far I see. That's why he's the father of the Pharisees. God says, everything you see, I'll give to you. Now, he's looked north, he's looked south, he's looked west, he's looked east. What's left? Nothing. After Lot chose for himself, God says to Abraham, even what Lot chose, I give to you and your descendants. It was for nothing. You make the wrong choices, they poison your life, and you gain nothing from them. That's what selfishness does to us sometimes. Lot's choices were also superficial. He saw what was on the surface. In verse 10, it says, he looked at the valley of the Jordan, how well watered it was. But if you look at verse 13, the end of that, it says, now the men of Sodom were wicked and sinning greatly against the Lord. He didn't see that. He saw the beauty, the outward greenness, but not the underlying evil of the men of the valley. So as he goes to the valley, unbeknown to him, he is going to expose his wife and 2 daughters to the most decadent society of ancient times. People who were so wicked that God finally decided to rain fire on them. It's very sad when you think about it, that actually Lot came out of Sodom alone. And even he did not come out unscathed. When you expose your family and yourself to the moral rot around you, expect results. Let's begin with Lot. When the angels came to him and they found him at the gate, probably with good reason, because he knew the people of Sodom. He invited them to his house. They said, oh, no, it's okay. We'll stretch out here along the street, and in the morning, we'll go about our business. And say, no. Please, come to my house. So, he takes them to his house. In the evening, the men of the city come and they stand outside the door. And they say, Lord, you're there? Bring out your guests, those men that came. We want to have sex with them. So Lot gets out of the house. And he says, brothers, don't do this. There are no brothers there. These are wicked men. Don't do this. These men have come under the protection of my roof. Now, that was true Middle Eastern. Where Lot came from, in the Mesopotamian area, that culture is still represented by Arabs today. And the Arab will welcome you to his home, and then in his house, he will protect you with his own life. So, what should Lot have said? The correct response to the people of Sodom was, over my dead body. If you want to touch my guests, you're going to have to go through me. Is that what Lot said? No, because he'd been influenced by the thinking of Sodom, which was Canaanite. And the Canaanite thinking was this: if there's trouble, sacrifice the females first. So Lot turns round and borrows the culture and moral thinking of the Canaanites that he has lived among. And he says, I have 2 daughters who are virgins. Take them and do what you want with them. I want every woman in this house to think of that statement. Take them and do whatever you wish with them. That's your father talking. Can you imagine your father saying that about you? Can you imagine your husband saying that about your daughter? Because that is how polluted his mind got when he lived among the people of Sodom. He thought it wasn't going to affect him, but it did, to the point where he adopted their culture, their way of reasoning and bargaining, and was willing to surrender his 2 daughters to them. It is no wonder that when he left Sodom with the girls, they also used the reasoning of Sodom on him. Lot's wife did not make it out of Sodom. The angels gave the whole family a very simple rule: flee and do not look back. I don't think there was anything particularly magical about looking back. It was just a test to say, show that you've really left Sodom. Don't look back. His wife couldn't resist it. Her heart was in Sodom. And she looked back. The rest of the story we know. Lot goes into the South Judean highlands. And up to today, there are lots of caves there. There are caves all over. You know about the famous Qumran caves near the Dead Sea, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in a cave. There are caves everywhere there. Lot makes one of the caves his home. He has lost everything. All he has is his 2 daughters. And the 2 girls sit there, and Sodom comes to them. Because in Canaanite thinking, a woman who is married into a family is responsible for ensuring that the family line is carried on. That is why Judah, when he refused to give his 3rd son to the daughter-in-law slept with him, tricked him into sleeping with him. She got pregnant by him. When it was found out, and of course Judah didn't know that it was his daughter-in-law he had slept with, he said, "Bring her out and burn her." That, by the way, is the typical man hypocrisy. Yeah? Do whatever you want, but if the wife tries anything, kill her. She's brought out. She says, okay, hold on a minute. It's okay to burn me, but before you burn me, take these 2 items to my father-in-law and ask him if he recognizes whose they are, his signet ring and his walking stick. And he looks at them. They are his. He had given them as a pledge. Now, what is interesting is his statement about Tamar, his daughter-in-law. He says, "Leave her alone, she is more righteous than I." Now, whatever did he mean? She pretended to be a prostitute, slept with him. How can he say she is more righteous than I? Because Judah denied her the right written in the law, although the law wasn't there at that time, but it was custom for her to carry on the family line by marrying her brother-in-law. When he failed to do it, she did it the Canaanite way, which is, if you can't marry your brother-in-law, the option left is your father-in-law. Sadly, the Canaanite other option was, if you're a girl in the family, there's no one to marry you, then you have to carry on the family line with your brother. If your brother is not there, well, your father has to do. So these girls actually thought they were doing the right thing. The most embarrassing, the most despicable thing that we read about in the Bible was done by girls who thought they were doing the right thing. How did Lot get to that point? It was simple. He came to a crossroads, like the crossroads on our screen. He had to make a decision, and he thought, it is so easy. I can make this one with my eyes closed. It's like a toss of the coin. Heads, I go to the valley. Tails, I stay on the mountains. But I've already decided it's heads because the valley is lush green. And by making that simple but foolish choice, Lot exposed himself and his whole family to the poison of Canaanite decadence. The result is chapter 19. We have choices before us. We make choices every day. None of us should be too clever and wise to listen to counsel. None of us should be so short-sighted as to see only what comes immediately out of the choice we make. I think I have mentioned this before. With the pain of repetition, let me say it again. Now, doctors in the house, forgive me. But we have heard horror stories about some of our doctors. You go to hospital, a pregnant woman about to deliver, and the doctor looks at you and says, "We need a C-section." Why? Because normal delivery, he can only charge 70,000. With a C-section, he can charge you 300,000. So never mind whether you can deliver naturally or not. Let's have a C-section because I am buying a bedsitter in Kileleshwa and I need to put in a deposit, and 10 C-sections will give me the deposit. Or you've heard of our buildings that collapse. You go up to the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th floor, and the whole thing comes down with the workers in it. And everybody says, where was the engineer when this was happening? Where was the engineer? Let me take you back to KCPE and KCSE especially. Those exams in Kenya that have become so important that at some point parents would get notes, secret notes from a teacher at the school, at your daughter's school, at your son's school. We need 5,000 shillings from you to buy exam papers. So, you send the 5,000, I send the 5,000, every parent sends the 5,000, and in Kenya, everyone has a price. So the security man at the container where the exam papers are is bought. Your son, your daughter, get those papers in advance, they work them through with the teacher, and your brilliant child gets an A, goes to the University of Nairobi to study medicine. Should it surprise you that your doctor is more interested in money? You started it. A lot of what our country is today, a lot of the problems that we face every day is because we made foolish choices at some point, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. When we ask ourselves, how did we end up here? Let us remember the choices we made. Friends, let us chorus it again. Choices, choices, choices. Shall we stand for the benediction? Heavenly Father, we come before you fully aware that our choices have consequences. That what we choose today will impact what happens tomorrow and the day after, sometimes for generations to come. As we make our choices, help us to be aware of the danger of short-sightedness, the danger of selfishness, and the danger of superficiality. Help us to listen to your word, to listen to the wise, to make choices after deliberating over the possible ramifications. As we go home, may your Spirit cause us to think on these things. And now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all now and forever. Amen. The Lord bless you. Go in peace. Make your choices wisely, because choices